My main man, Jesse Salas, is back on the Rethink Real Estate podcast for our series to talk about the buyer side lawsuit. This is really something that I wanted to bring back to the forefront because we've had a lot of people commenting at the beginning of this year that they're getting sellers that are very much aware of it, even clients that are just reaching out to them that might not be selling, that are just asking agents questions. So we've got some scripts and dialogues and some concepts to go through, how to handle that situation, also how to think about it as well from an industry perspective. And also Jesse and I talk about where the market's going as well. Again, a very insightful episode, very practical in the sense of how to talk about this within your business when you're getting asked questions. Hopefully it helps. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2024 and we've finally got the man himself back on the podcast. It's our frequent guest and man myth legend. There's a whole lot of things that I could go with here, okay? But Mr. Jesse Salas, thanks for joining us back again on Rethink Real Estate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to be back. 2024. Can't believe it. We're here.
I know it's a strange one because it's funny. I'm going to start off with a bit of an odd question for you, Jesse, but with the people that I've been speaking to, and obviously you run a great deal of agents in the San Diego community and you get to see a great deal of different networks, I've found this year that nobody actually wants to do a business plan. Everybody's basically like, oh, we survived 2023. I just want to chill for a minute for 2024 because I think it's going to be an awesome real estate market. What is your opinion, mate? Do you think people are underestimating how turbulent it could be? They think that now they've gotten over the gap of 2023, that everything's just going to be fine. What are your thoughts?
Let's be honest. Has anybody ever wanted to do a business plan?
No, not at all. Yeah. And that's the theme. That's the theme of Rethink Real Estate in January, is that why everyone hates doing it.
Yeah, and then if they do one, they don't look at it till the end of the year, right? Till it's time to do another one. So I think the state of the market, agents are hoping, and it's a lot of wishful thinking, that things are going to get better. We saw interest rates drop over the past couple of weeks, and they've held. And fingers crossed that they continue to hold. But I think a lot of people are hoping that the worst is over, and they feel like, oh, market's back. Things are going to boom. Rates are going to come down again in March. Life is good again. I don't believe it. I mean, the Feds just said, was it last night, that they probably are going to be pushing things back? So maybe now it's May. Moody's is throwing out numbers, and giving dates of mid-year. So I think we're going to see a slow first half of 2024. That being said, it is also the time of year where people should start thinking about listing their home, should start thinking about buying a home. So yeah, we are going to see a little bit of a bump compared to that winter time that we're used to during the holidays. So things will be good. I'm very curious to see what happens in March. That'll be.
I think there's a few things, like a couple of headwinds that people aren't expecting here at the moment. I think politically, obviously, it's an election year, okay, and people are that's obviously going to play some type of effect. Obviously, regardless of what side of the aisle that you're on, just the political talk and whatever it may be, people are a little bit more apprehensive in a political year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Secondarily to that, though, as well, is that you've got wars in the Middle East and you've got wars in Europe or Eastern Europe that are happening at the moment that can definitely play an effect on things. I think that people think that we're too insulated to some of those political effects and also the war side of things as well. I think all of those can definitely have an effect on capital markets, on, different things, and general, bigger companies that definitely play a role in the economy sort of pulling back or whatever it may be. I just saw, BlackRock just laid off 3% of all of their workforce across all of their companies worldwide, and just because of different political wins is what they said, or different challenges within the industry and change, which could be an excuse for just lowering the P&L so that they can make more money. I don't know, but anyway, it's an interesting year, and that I think that we've got coming up. I don't know whether it's going to be good, bad, or indifferent. I think that we should be preparing for turbulent, and not just thinking that we've gotten through 2023 and now everything's going to be great. I know that that's not the most optimistic approach, but hey, Speaking of turbulent in our industry at the moment, Jesse, and the reason that I wanted to have you on is because of your unique point of view of being able to see things from an agent perspective, a business owner's perspective, a manager's perspective, and the touches that you have all over the country in the industry. The buyer broker side of the business has recently gone through a lawsuit. We all know about it. The general public knows about it now. The first part of this that I wanted to have you on was, hey, let's go through some objections that we're seeing out there. But let's start off with some philosophy from you in the first degree, if you don't mind. I really want to hear your perspective of what's happening out there in the living rooms, in the brokerages, and also in the brokerage community. What is happening? What is the opinions? What are the questions that everybody has when it comes to the lawsuit?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'll preface everything where I was really into the lawsuit towards the end of the year. It was very interesting. It was fascinating for me because you think about it, nothing has changed in our industry for years and years and years, and arguably, it's time. Something needs to change now. Whether the lawsuit was legitimate, not legitimate, I mean, there's so many different thoughts on that. Regardless of the outcome, I think we can agree that it's out there. It's being pushed. The number of social media, Facebook sponsored ads from attorneys for class action suits, advertising to me, to my fellow friends, colleagues, and so forth, of asking homeowners if they feel like they've paid too much. I mean, it's in front of us. It's out there. So how do we react? And what I'm seeing out there is a little bit of an overreaction, but I'm also seeing an underreaction. Right. And what I mean by that is overreaction by those agents that are worried that the market's going to change, that everything is different. Oh no, what's going to happen? How are we going to survive? Right. That sky is falling, that Chicken Little effect, versus I would say the majority of my colleagues out there that don't know much about the case at all. Didn't know there was a case. Don't know how to react to the case. Don't know who won, who lost. Was there an appeal? Was there not? What was the settlement? They don't know that. And I think that's the problem that we have as an industry. And partially, I'm going to blame the industry as a whole for not educating and informing us as real estate agents, those that are on the front lines. Those are the ones that have to deal with these questions and concerns to be able to articulate what's going on so that the client feels comfortable. Because all of this hinges around a lack of transparency in the industry, right? And so if we're not out there explaining what's going on, making the client feel comfortable, transparency, then we're just adding to our own problem.
It really is the polar opposite. It's this pendulum swing of the industry. There's people that are panicked and then people that just absolutely know nothing about it whatsoever. Yeah. But then, like, you just make such a great point, is that regardless of the outcome, it is out there. And it's funny, for the first time, I listen to a few different podcasts that are very unreal estate related, just so that, I can think a bit more laterally. I like to listen about different industries and all of that type of stuff. And for the very first time, I had some cross-pollination of real estate within every single one of those podcasts, every one of them. It said, hey, look, this big lawsuit just came down and it could really change this industry. And a lot of them are about disruption. A lot of them are about entrepreneurship. A lot of them are about, industry changes in different spaces and everything along those lines. And it's massive to see that news trickle effect across. What are you seeing in the living room? Let's take it from an industry perspective. You are one of the people that does a higher volume of deal count than most. You've got a really good price point in San Diego. What are you seeing in the living room? Have you had some questions come up about this from the general public?
Yeah, so I'll go even a little bit more macro on it in the sense of my office. So we just had our first meetings at all the office just yesterday. And that was the question I asked. Over the past 2-3 weeks that we've taken off during the holidays, how many of you have heard from your clients? Raise your hand. I want to hear, how many of you have you heard from a client, from somebody who's important, not just a random conversation about the case, some concern. And I'd say 80 to 90% of the hands went up. And the ones that didn't go up are probably the ones that aren't out there doing business anyway. So it is out there, but it's not from the standpoint of, hey, I want to sell my home, but I don't want to pay a buyer's agent.
It's not that extreme yet.
Not at all. It's, I heard something. What is it about? Tell me what it's about. And I think it comes from a place of, you as the expert sitting here in my living room, what do we need to do to make sure that we still sell my home for the highest possible price so I don't ultimately hurt myself? There's just that uncertainty out there.
Do you think that there's a part of this, Jesse, where they're looking? Could it be going through this different stage or this initial stage? You know how there's the steps of grieving. There's all of those different steps. This could be just a step within the process of people understanding. The first step is, I actually don't know what this actually means because I only sell a home every few years, every 7 years, every 10 years, every however often I'm not really involved in real estate, is the underlying. And they're reaching out to their broker going, what does this actually even mean? And yet they don't even have anything to sell at the moment. Yeah. So there's a level of naivety across the general public that's probably safeguarding us a little bit at this point, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it also comes back to what I just said a few minutes ago, right? Is the explanation. I mean, the reality is before this case, during the case, and now after the case, most homeowners don't sell homes often enough to know how commissions work. Right. In many cases, I hear people think that the full commission amount goes just to the listing agent and isn't shared by the buyer's agent. Or the one that we talked about yesterday that's very common is, who actually pays the buyer's agent? Is it the real estate agent or is it the seller? You can answer that several different ways, but if the average homeowner doesn't know, there's a problem. Right. And it makes sense why there's confusion and frustration. It's more of them just wanting to understand. And they may not understand. We know they don't understand what's going on right now because a lot of us in the industry don't, but they also didn't understand prior. So you just have confusion on top of confusion on top of confusion, and there leads to what? Just more confusion. And then there's no trust in the industry. And that's very easy to lose trust in somebody that's not giving you a full picture of how it works from A to Z.
That's a really strong point. It's a really, really, really strong point. I think that there's a part of this also, though, that we're going in a different trend. And I would love to hear your opinion on this. I'd love to hear more specifically around San Diego and what you're seeing. I don't know whether this is right or wrong. So a quick answer from you could really derail where I'm going with this. But I have an opinion of San Diego, right, just from an onset. Now, I've been in the US now over 10 years. I've probably spent more time in San Diego than most people spend in San Diego when I mean driving through it and whatever it may be. No, well, I find San Diego a very young and vibrant place. Would that be fair?
I'd agree, yeah.
Okay. So when I say young and vibrant, I mean families, I mean, younger generations staying there, like growing up and staying there and not choosing to exit because it's a wonderful place. You got younger people coming there because it's a wonderful place to live and the climate's beautiful. Now, as I go through this, my pure point in all of this is that this is just today that I heard this information. The average age of a home buyer, okay, in the US is 47 years of age. If you were to go back and look at that 15 to 20 years ago, okay, now again, these numbers might be wrong because the person that I heard this from is not in day-to-day real estate or not diving into the analytics overly. If you were to go back 15 to 20 years ago, the average home buyer age was actually 27. So what he's saying is that the average home buyer means that, this is giving a pure indication that the older are keeping all of the wealth and pricing the young out of the market because of lack of job growth and lack of, pay growth and all of these different things and the inflation problems and blah, 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 blah,
Sure.
blah. But where I'm going with this is from a commission standpoint is that the US is categorically international real estate, Jesse. You've been to Australia, you've been to New Zealand, you've spoken at these conferences, these different facets from the involvement that you have within Harcourts. But you go to the general public, there's still 40% of Americans that don't have passports.
Yeah.
So if you look at this from an industry perspective and from a country perspective, is there's not enough people that understand what others are doing in order to understand that this is outside of the norm of getting a 5 or 6% commission charge to sell their home, okay? So what I'm saying is the older generations are used to that. And the older generation is the older generation that's going to be doing most of the real estate transactions for the foreseeable future. So to me, that says, okay, until these people die and the new generation get their money because they're being priced out of the marketplace as it stands anyway, it's probably going to be the norm for a very long period of time. Is that a logical way of thinking, or am I just trying to make something up to have a theory?
I think there's some truth to that, but I'll play devil's advocate. And before I do, I heard that same stat. I think I read a headline, 47, 48 years old. if I read that correctly, it was from last year over the past 12 months. The
Sure.
average age has gone up.
Okay.
The devil's advocate part comes into, during COVID, how many articles did we read that said that the millennials were leading the way, right, in home purchasing?
Mm.
So I'm not sure. What I will agree with 100% is, the older generation is used to certain things that the younger is not. Same thing with interest rates. The older generation doesn't blink when they see 7, 8, 9%. The younger generation, oh my goodness, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? No, never,
Yeah.
no way. So, and obviously, there's a lot of other factors, that were different then versus now. But yeah, it's a different time. I think it's a lot easier to explain the situation of what's going on to somebody that's older versus somebody that's younger. But at the end of the day, what's consistent with all age groups is nobody wants to pay more than they have to, right? And that's where the crux of all of this is.
That's a very, very strong point. Let's lead into some practical elements of this if we can, mate.
Yep.
There's no one better that I would have on the podcast to sort of go through just some practical, when I say scripts and dialogues, some concepts and everything to have in the back of your mind, because regardless of whether this is at the forefront of sellers' minds or not, I think being underprepared for a question to come your way in a listing presentation or to service your clients is just really horrible. So when inevitably we're getting questions about this, what are you seeing the questions be? Because I know that you've fielded a few from past clients and whatever, but so let's go to just informing people that aren't in the middle of a real estate transaction at the moment that you're just keeping in contact. And let's talk about after that, people that you're in the living room, they're listing their home, and they're bringing up this question, and they're like, hey, can we offer less of a buyer fee? Can we not offer less of a buyer fee? So let's start off with just clients that are asking you questions. How are you dealing with those and giving them a bit of information? What is the script, so to speak, or what are you saying to them?
I think it's a slippery slope there, right? Because we have to remember that if we just talk about us wanting to make more money, and we're very fortunate, real estate agents, we make good money. What we do a poor job of, though, is explaining how much work that we do. And I've shared this with you. I think the last time we were talking about this is then you sprinkle in these shows that have become really popular, like reality shows that show a lot of money being made, which really at the end of the day, it never gets into the bank account, at least that much, but it never shows how much work that's put into it. And so it comes across as we're making a lot of money and doing very little. And so I think when you're having that casual conversation with somebody, you have to be sympathetic to that so that what we're saying doesn't come across as greedy, right? It doesn't come across as, oh, well, these people will think they're entitled to make this much money. So I usually lead with something I mentioned a little while ago when we started this podcast is, change is inevitable. At every point throughout history, it doesn't matter what industry it is, doesn't matter what civilization it is, change is going to happen. And I think we're due for change. What that looks like, I don't know. And my concern, though, lies with the buyers. It's not my concern, how much I'm going to make or how much I'm going to be able to pull out from a seller. My concern is with buyers because what's happening right now is making it even tougher for buyers to purchase a home. There's no doubt that prices are high. There's no doubt that interest rates are higher. And now what this case is trying to do, or will ultimately do, if it ends up passing, is you're going to have buyers now have to come out of pocket to pay for representation. And I mean, that's the hat trick right there. I mean, and not in a good way. So, I'm not sure what needs to change and what needs to happen. Clearly something does need to change, but I don't think it's at the expense of hurting the buyers and putting them there at even more of a disadvantage to purchase a home. And I think right there, what you're doing by sharing that with your clients is you're allowing them to think. Because all they're hearing out there is real estate agents get paid too much. The agent's making all of this money. They're not hearing that money is being deferred and now the buyer has to come out of pocket and pay that themselves. And that's a problem.
I think that's such a strong point, and you're trying to be middle of the aisle. you're trying to give both points of view. I want to change things up a little bit though, because I'm just thinking like, I don't know why today, maybe it just is the mindset that I'm in. I'm thinking we might be dealing with somebody that's like, Jesse, quite frankly, I don't give a fuck just as long as you get me the most amount of money for my home. I just want the money in my pocket. I think that there's an element of this that you can take an angle at if in fact you go down that middle of the aisle sort of thing and the seller isn't, or your client or the seller is not like, well, yeah, that's all good and well. That's great. That's a great political answer. But realistically, I don't really care because just as long as I'm netting the most amount of money, I think we could probably segue into, well, more difficulty purchasing a property creates less competition for your property, which means less money for you anyway.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of it, Ben, can be visual, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I always talk about bag of tricks, right? I mean, when you go into a listing presentation, let's say now we're in that living room and we're talking to that seller, I need to have multiple different ways to explain, right, why it makes sense to continue down the road that we're down. If the goal is to get you the most money, some people are visual, and so some people I may need to pull up the MLS. And as of this morning, there were roughly 25 active homes on the MLS in San Diego County. Out of those 2,500, I think there were 4 that were offering 0% commission. Right? I think there was like another 12 that was offering 1% commission. Everybody else was the norm. So out of 2,500 and some change, you have roughly 15 to 16 homes. I mean, that is a small minority. And if you're a seller looking to net the most amount of money and you're seeing that the competition around you is offering the 2.5%, 2%, 3% commission, and you want to come in and offer 0% compensation to that buyer's agent, who do you think that buyer's agent is going to show properties first to? And let's be honest, human nature, money motivates people. Are they really ever going to show your home? It puts you at a disadvantage. It puts us as the agent as a disadvantage. And so if you are trying to net the most money in the shortest amount of time, is this where you want to be, or do you want to be here? Let's talk about this. All right.
Yeah, it's interesting if you sit here and you think about it, that even at that point, there's when you're marketing a property and when you've got your home on the marketplace, you would agree with this, Jesse, is that anything that's outside of the norm, you and I deal with this with auction, all of this type of stuff, it creates questions. And when the question is, well, hang on, why is there not a buyer broker fee offered on this one? Why did my buyer's agent say that they didn't want to show? There's an argument to say, well, buyers will come directly and I can save myself money. But the ultimate thing is that at the end of the day, whenever a negotiation hasn't worked, it's when the other side feels like the other side, or one side feels that the other side is being greedy.
Yeah.
And that's when a deal doesn't come together. It's funny, like this depiction of what buyers have of a seller and a seller has of a buyer. If they were two people that met at a bar in downtown San Diego and had a drink, they'd get along like a house on fire. But for some reason, in the midst of a transaction where there's this they can't see each other, there's this depiction of the worst kind of person trying to take advantage of them financially. So that's another part that we need to take into consideration, that if you're going to offer less, it reflects poorly on you and the home, okay, and could hurt us in the negotiation. Like, it would be interesting eventually, Jesse, to see like some type of statistics around how many lowball offers does a home that offers less commission. So from, say it goes from 2.5% to 2%, how many more lowball offers does that home get versus another one? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it just looks weird. I agree with you 100%. You're in that category of those 16 that I just mentioned. You're going to look at that. Even a buyer is going to look at that as, well, that's weird. Why?
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? And that's not the mindset you want when somebody looks at your property for the first time to think, what's going on there? Something funky is going on. That's weird. I don't want my listings to be there at all. No. So, I get it. There's always going to be somebody out there that's going to want to pay as little as possible, right? And then you have somebody here that's trying to take advantage of it. I personally feel bad for the agents that are listing those properties that are now categorizing themselves into, compensation that is not there, right? And so what does that look like when you really break it down? Who's taking care of the buyer? Who's responsible for the buyer? Who's pulling the right forms? Who's doing the right negotiations? Where's that due diligence? It's not there because nobody's going to work for free. right? I don't know any buyer's agent, I'll be honest, including myself, that would walk into a transaction and say, hey, I'm going to do a lot of work and take on the liability to help you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Don't worry, I'll do it for free. You don't have to pay me. It's just, it's the reality is that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a part of me that is thinking this. I haven't had any situations that I can speak of, but I just want to think this, and you're going to tell me that, hey, you're being silly and, don't think badly of the agent community. But, but I can see this where there's a number of people, and the people I'm talking about, the people that we've dealt with. And when I say people, I mean agents that we've that we deal with, where they're going to convince a seller of 6% commission, but they're going to keep 4.5%. Okay. And they're only going to offer 1.5% to the buyer side because they think that it's appropriate now to offer less.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a part of the industry that I can assume is already there. Have you seen that?
I mean, I think that was there even prior to this, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Good point. It's a strong point.
I mean, ethically, the people that were doing that before, they're just taking advantage of it now. And I'd like to think that most aren't. And the reality is I don't come across that very often. Those agents out there that have done that. They have a name and they have a label for a reason, so to speak. But yeah, I don't think you're going to see too many people taking advantage of that because, again, the majority isn't doing that. And I think that's really, really helpful to have kind of a checks and balance for those that are trying to get away with that and take advantage of it.
So, Jesse, I want to take another quick little segue here and just use your knowledge and your planning that you're doing with multiple agents and everything like that for 2024. I think that you having that oversight of both agents that are new agents that are experienced, yourself doing high production as well, and then that scope across the business, as I've already said, across the country, is that what are you seeing working for people as they plan for 2024 at the moment? Like what are you seeing? Well, maybe a different question is what are you seeing work and what are you seeing not work at the moment as people plan for their businesses in 2024? I know you acknowledge this in the very first degree, and I'm right there with you. I hate planning. It's something that I find incredibly difficult. What's the strategy at the moment?
I think it's funny because our head coach, Tom Ferry, says this, right? What's working? Working is working, right? Everyone's asking what's working. You know what's working? Working. Like just getting out there and working. I think right now you have two things. You have the time of year, the seasonality where people are actually thinking about buying and or selling. But you also have something that's, I think, extremely important and somewhat similar to what we experienced during COVID is people have now gotten used to it. They've gotten used to this market, right? They were waiting for rates to drop. They were waiting for prices to drop. And, they were holding on to that. They were on the fence thinking it might happen. But a lot of them have realized it's not. Or they've realized I can't hold out anymore. I'm tired of living in this one bedroom. We now have a new baby. We need to move. I think people have gotten used to where we're at in the market. So there's opportunity out there. And we have a training in the office tomorrow, a mastermind, right? Tips, tricks, strategies to try to capture more business based on your business plan. And the analogy that I've shared, and I'll start with tomorrow, is those wind booths, so to speak, where you have the money spinning around, and you see some people in those booths, and they're in there for 30 seconds, and they capture nothing. But yet we've all seen those videos of those people, and they have different types of strategies where they capture a ton of that money. That's the analogy. What are we doing right now to capture all of that money? Because there is opportunity and it's spinning around us. What is your trick? What is your strategy? Right? And I think right now, if you can just put that out there right now, there are homeowners, there are buyers raising their hand saying, I'm ready to do something. And we just have to be in a position to be able to catch that and not let it pass right through our fingers. So for me, there's no silver bullet out there because everybody's different. Everybody's strategy is different. Everybody's type of business, whether you get your business from open house or online leads, or you work with buyers, or you work with sellers, you have to find the niche that works for you. And most importantly, it's how do you get this face right in front of those people? How do you have a conversation with those people? And if you can figure out some way to do it, it'll work. And Ben, I'll share this because one of our agents, Adrian Monero in our office, right? There's a great story. It won't be a long story. She called me the other day and said, Jesse, I called these. And by the way, she's good. She's good at scripts. She's good at making calls. She knows how to handle objections. She's a great agent. We're lucky to have her.
Well, she's a several $100,000 a year GCI performer. Yeah.
Easy. And she calls me and says, Jesse, I had this horrible call. I just, nothing came out the way it should have. And they called me and they said, yeah, let's meet. And she ended up getting a listing. And the point of that story is we worked so hard to role play and to practice and handle objections and do everything that we should. But sometimes it's just making the call, just connecting with people. We don't have to be fancy. We don't have to be salesy. It's just being genuine, letting them know that, hey, I can help you. I have a strong interest in trying to make things easier and better for you. And that's what she was able to do. And that's why she got the business. So, we can get fancy. Nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, just get out there and have those conversations with people. And most importantly, if they bring up this whole issue with the lawsuit, just remind them that nothing has changed. The reality is nothing has changed. I'm here to show you the value that I bring to get as many people to look at your home as possible so we can get you that highest possible price.
I think that there's some gold in that. I love the language, mate. I have a strong interest in making your real estate transaction easy for you. That's beautiful. That's great. One thing I just want to point out quickly, those wind tunnels, the wind boxes that you were talking about.
Yeah, whatever they're called.
They've always pissed me off when I've looked at them on when I've seen them on a show. Like someone's standing there and they're just grabbing at the air, trying to grab the money. Get on your knees because all the money's on the ground. It really bothers me. I don't know why.
It's all on the ground, or you see those people lean up against the edge and just let it come right into them. But the reason why I bring that up as an analogy is because that's what we do as real estate agents. We grab for things. We have no plan. We haven't thought it out. There's no strategy. And we wonder why all this opportunity around us, we end up with not much at the end of the year. So put a little time, effort, think about it, and you'll find some success.
What do you think final thing, what do you think people do wrong when they plan? It's a complicated thing. It's to sit there and try and get people to be as realistic as possible is very difficult because you're you're being crazy. But what do you think they do wrong when they plan?
I think there's two things. Number one, I don't think they take their own strengths and or what they like to do into consideration, right? They find out that somebody pays X amount of dollars for online leads and they're making a lot of money and they think they could do it too, right? Or whatever it may be. They don't take into account themselves and if that's going to work for them. That's number one. What are your strengths? What do you like to do? Is it geographically close to you? You can sustain it. Do you have a budget to be able to maintain that over the next 6 or 12 months? Whatever it may be, they don't take that into consideration. The other big problem, and I think you're going to have him on as a guest coming up, Bill Pipes. I heard him say this some time ago, and I'm going to chop it up, but it was something like there's never a wrong goal. Whatever goal it may be, no matter how big it may be, there's nothing that's wrong with that goal. What could be wrong with that goal is the amount of work that it takes to get there. And that's the problem. We don't really break down on what it takes to get there. We don't realize how many hours it's going to take, how many conversations it's going to take, how much money it's going to take, how long it's going to take to get there. We don't put that into consideration. We just go straight to the end point and say, well, if I work hard, I'll be able to hit that number. And we wonder why when the end of the year comes or the end of the quarter, month, whatever it may be, why we didn't hit that goal like we thought we should have. And by the way, you have the mindset to do it. You have the motivation, you have the work ethic, but you miss the mark. It's because we're not taking into consideration the work that needs to be done on a daily basis to be able to get to that goal. To me, those are the two problems right there.
Really, really well put. To end out things, Jesse, I'm trying to do a better job of this to sort of have a little bit of consistency on the Rethink Real Estate. I want to ask you about, books, podcasts, life hacks that you're going through, routines that you've got at the moment, just in a quick little snapshot. First, I want to start off with real estate. Okay, you're the one thing that you make me tired when I think about the volume of real estate stuff that you capture and listen and the volume of content that you constantly bring to your agents and the people in your team and around you. So, mate, where do you get your real estate resource from a perspective? Podcasts, books, coaches, where's the real estate stuff come from for you?
Oh, I mean, if you asked me this question 2-3 years ago, I would say everywhere, right? Okay. Emails, podcasts, books, coaches. I would say now it's so easy to get it from social media. Right. These algorithms are giving you exactly what you want. You just start finding a bunch of coaches. You'll land on something and it's beautiful. They're all short. They're all 30 to 60 seconds. Yeah. Your attention span needs to be very little. So I just hear so many things. And when I hear somebody, um, I think the mistake I used to make was I hear it, and if it doesn't apply to me, I ignore it and I disregard it. Now, whenever
Right.
I hear anything, even if it's not real estate related, it could be a commercial for, I don't know, bugs. It could be a newscaster, a politician, somebody on air talking. How can I take what they just said? How can I take that marketing piece? How can I make that my own? How can I turn that into real estate? So I'm constantly listening to what's around me and what I like and what works, what resonates with people, and how can I flip it to the real estate industry? That's where a lot of my stuff comes from right now.
Yeah.
It's people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars around us to get our attention. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Rinse and repeat. Just turn it into real estate. Make it yours.
Do you know what? You bring up a really solid point. Like, again, if you guys are addicted to social media or in the sense of reels, which reels are just, do you know, they're saying at the moment that Netflix has gotten to a point where because you've got to make a decision on the show that you need to select next, is that you're seeing time on Netflix decrease and time on TikTok and reels on Instagram increase. And they seem to think that that is the biggest threat for Netflix and, you know, Prime and all of that type of stuff at this point. Go ahead and just like some of the stuff that's a little more relevant. Like, again, we're all addicted to that stuff. Go ahead and just like some of the coaches or some of the people with that philosophy, and the algorithm will start showing you more valuable content that is actually bite-sized for you. That's a really great point.
Oh, yeah.
Really great point indeed. And then drawing parallels to our industry, I think it takes a certain type of mind to be able to do that. So that's awesome. But outside of real estate, Jesse, what are we doing for books? What are we doing for podcasts? Is there time for that? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think there's always time, right? I mean, you've had him on as a guest, Phil Jones. Exactly what to say. It's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. That's a big one. For me personally, you know, I've gone back to some of the basics. Gratitude every morning, right? There's scientific studies out there that it just doesn't show that you appreciate, but it does something to the brain, right? There's a lot of studies out there, so the gratitude's been a big one.
Is that
Affirmation.
just is that just journaling, mate? Like, is that like how do you?
No, I don't have time to sit down and do that. Honestly, I'm sure it works for some people. I have to say it out loud, right?
Okay.
So I can be on my way to the car. I could be getting in the car. I could be in the shower, but I just want to vocally say out loud, right? Three things that I'm thankful for. And it becomes a struggle after the first week to come up with three things. Because it's easy to say, oh, friends, family, mom, this and that. But after you have the week, you really have to force yourself to start thinking about little things. And I think that's where the magic happens. The other one, and this is, I heard, I'll bring this up because I heard this last night. If anybody watched the national championship game, football game, and I can't think of Michigan's quarterback's name right now, but he brushes his teeth every morning with his left hand. Mind you, he's right-handed, right? And this is something that I've been doing for some time. Granted, the last couple of years I haven't, but brushing your teeth with your left hand allows the brain to get out of its comfort zone. And I
Right.
think that's the problem that we have, right? Is we started the year, we're ready to go, we're ready to try something new, and all those goals and aspirations or the changes in our behavior, they never work out. And that's because our brains are so used to routine. Every little thing we do from the time that we get up, many of us, or at least for me, we grab the phone immediately. We get out of bed in the same side of the bed every day. We walk to the bathroom, at least for myself. You brush your teeth with your same hand. Everything is a routine, and yet we're trying to go against that and force something new. It's not going to work. The odds are
Yeah.
very slim. But if you start tricking the brain, changing the brain, it allows some of these new strategies, these new techniques, these new behaviors to adhere a little bit more into your daily routine to be long term. And so getting out of the opposite side of the bed, brushing your teeth being the most important one with your left hand, which is going to feel really funky, but that's setting off certain neurons and doing a lot of other chemical stuff that I can't explain or articulate, or I'll sound like an idiot. But trust me, it works. And when you start doing stuff like that, playing around with stuff, when it's fun, it's interesting, but two, you'll start seeing changes. You'll start seeing growth in yourself personally. And for me, that has been really helpful. So if there's any little tidbit tomorrow, when you wake up tonight, try brushing your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed, or with your right hand if you're left-handed.
Well, mate, a little bit of gratitude is that we very much appreciate you, mate, and thank you for being on Rethink Real Estate again and offering tremendous value. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.